Hi guys, this is the last video I'm going to do on crime and punishment, and it's looking at changes to crime, which is very much dependent on your factors, and then just a quick chat about new crimes. I'm going to start off just by talking about this idea that crime has increased. This is a real debate at the moment. Has crime actually increased, or are we just reporting it better, or do we just have better technology? Here is a chart showing you recorded crimes per 100,000. And as you can see, from 1901, crime has steadily gone up to 1991, although I am reliably informed that since 1991, crime has been falling. Now, the reason why this is very debatable and why this is something just to think about quite carefully is it because we are recording more crime and we have better crime detection and technology, or is it that there actually is an increase in crime, or do we just have lots of new types of crime? So, for example, in 1981, there was no such thing as mobile phone theft. The creation of a new invention, which is a factor of technology, and all of a sudden you've got new crimes. So it's just something to think about when you answer questions on new crimes and change to crime and that kind of thing. So what are new crimes? Well, the factors that you're going to talk about here really are technology, government, attitudes, travel and poverty, and technology is the massively important one. If you're stuck in an exam and you can't think of a new type of crime, just think of a new piece of technology and then just think if there's a crime associated to it. So I just used the example of mobile phone theft. I'm sure all of you are watching this on a computer. What crimes are associated to computers? So if you get stuck, use technology as your factor for new crime and go from there. So new crimes, the internet and computers and that kind of technology. So there's literally hundreds of crimes linked to the internet. Things like identity fraud, copyright theft. With a computer and the internet, people can carry out some pretty impressive crimes. And I'm sure if you put your mind to it, you can think of at least 5 or 6. You won't need that many examples in an exam, so that's one you can talk about. Another so-called new crime is terrorism. Although you could argue that the people who tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament in 1605 were terrorists, although you might use the argument that there was a religious element to that. But terrorism is a big one, and from 1960 the IRA carried out several bombings in the UK, most notably bombing of the Arndale Centre in Manchester. And then since 2005 we've seen, unfortunately, a real growth in extremist activity in this country. I don't want to get into the religious side of it because to me they're not Muslims, but you could argue that you've got a massive problem in this country now with extremist terrorism. And you know, if you think about that carefully, it links you back to your internet, because these people are watching these videos and being radicalised online by people, and then carrying out attempting to carry out all sorts of horrific attacks. The suicide bombing in London in 2005 is probably a really good example, but unfortunately, very recently we've had some examples that you can use as well. So for example, you could talk about the lone wolf attack on the Houses of Parliament that we recently saw in the news. You invent cars and you invent a new crime. You invent car crime. So by the 1930s, cars became cheaper. After 1935, drivers needed a licence. And today, car crime is a major crime that takes up a lot of police and court time. And if you just stop and think about cars, you can probably come up with easily 20 crimes. Think about crimes that the driver can commit: speeding, driving without care and attention, dangerous driving, death by dangerous driving. Think about the things that you cannot do. So you might not tax your car, you might not have insurance, you might drive without a license. There's literally hundreds of crimes linked to cars, and that is the factor of technology. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about crimes that aren't necessarily new crimes. So murder is a great example, although there has been an increase since the 1900s apparently. And murder's been around since the beginning of time. It's always been a crime, so that's one to factor in. Theft has always been a crime. Burglary, which is breaking into people's houses and stealing from them, has always been a crime. Shoplifting is a new crime because it's only relatively recently that products have been displayed in shops and you can walk around and browse them and pick them off the shelves. So there's a good example of where you've got your change in continuity. You've got an old crime, theft, which shoplifting is simply theft from a shop, except you can argue it's a new a new sort of development. Drug addiction often leads to theft, so you can bring in drug addiction as that, and you easily talk about those types of crimes. You've got hate crimes. We've got increased diversity in society, and obviously an increase in people who are willing to report those types of crimes. So you could look back at your chart and say, well, has there been a real increase in crime? Or is it that in 1950, someone who was being racially abused would just get on with it and, unfortunately just take that? Whereas in the 1990s, they'd be more likely to go to the police. I don't know the answer to that. I'd say it's probably that case, but, you've got hate crimes, and they're something that you need to factor into an answer. And then you've got violent crimes and sexual offences and sexual crimes. They've always existed, but we have now an increased reporting, and people are less willing to put up with these types of crimes. And it doesn't always have to be the most extreme stuff. It could be, for example, minor physical abuse, or it could be sexual harassment in the workplace. People are not willing to tolerate these things. Okay, so that's just a real quick overcap of some examples of new crimes and change to crime. I'm pretty confident that you guys are intelligent enough to use your common sense and your knowledge of the world that you have today, and your knowledge of crime and punishment to really, drill down a good answer for this kind of thing. Just remember your factors. Remember your technology is really important for your new crimes, and then just read the question carefully and be logical with your answer. Okay.